I've been thinking a lot about being swallowed by a whale. I hear it's something that happens. Has happened for a long time. I've done my research, and by and large, it's mainly men who are swallowed by whales, often in moments of personal or spiritual strife. According to the 2017 study by John Crampton Fellowship, there are over 170 myths from all around the world whereby the male hero gets swallowed by a whale, large fish, or sea monster. The swallowee emerges shaken, humbled, redeemed even. The fate of the whale is often not so optimistic. In these stories, what is accounted as being inside the whale varies. Sometimes the swallowee discovers shipwrecks, treasure, or even entire parallel universes inside the belly of the whale. Often the swallowee comes across others previously swallowed, hanging out inside the whale, playing cards, smoking, or drinking. I've been thinking about these men, gathered together inside the collective body of the whale. Ahab, Jonah, Geppetto, Heracles, recently Cape Cod lobster diver Michael Packard, sitting around together quietly, ruminating. In truth, it is physically impossible for any whale to swallow a human whole, temporarily house them safely in their gut, and then regurgitate them out at some later date to recount the tale. There exists what I can only call an entire cinematic subgenre on YouTube, featuring men who describe in dynamic detail exactly why this is the case. They note the narrow esophagi of baleen whales and the multiple acid-filled stomachs of toothed whales. More to the point, however, is the fact that whales do not like to swallow people. Whales do not want people inside them. But the fantasy holds a tight grip, and in recent months I too have found myself again and again drawn through the too tight esophagus, past the wandering womb, and into the dim belly of the whale. I feel around inside, looking for lumps of ambergris.
Windpipe. In 2021, I spent some weeks with my mother in a house where you could watch the whale migration. The whales were travelling to warmer waters to give birth. I spent hours watching the horizon with binoculars, waiting to glimpse a plume of exhalation, a black tail, a splash, a leap, a huge body propelled clear of the weighted ocean. I kept thinking of their bodies out there, warm-blooded bodies in a huge cold ocean, inhaling deeply, great accordion lungs enfolding cargo of oxygen, rib cages expanding to carry this cargo, giant heart beating. Waiting and watching the horizon, not knowing where they were, but knowing that they were there, or there, moving along whilst we slept, our human bodies so grounded and static in comparison. The whales travel past where the lighthouse spins in constant motion day and night. As children, we used to watch and count how long it would take between rotations, 27 seconds, trying to hold our breath. I once learnt how to imitate the sound a whale makes underwater. There are 3 steps which you're welcome to try with me. Lock your nose, close your mouth. Without opening your mouth, say the word, oh. Thank you. The town we stayed at is upon the most easterly tip of Australia. It was built on unceded Bundjalung country. When white settlers arrived here in the 1850s, they started by removing the giant cedars from the hinterland areas behind the gums of the coastline, pulling out the great timbers like fresh ripe molars, sending them down the mountains on chutes to be floated down the coast. Following decades saw the hills turned into cattle pastures. The local abattoir pumped bovine blood directly into the sea to disperse into the salty water. As the tides withdrew, thin lines of red would appear on the sand like an army in retreat. And from 1954 to 1962, the primary industry of this town named Byron Bay, not after the poet, but instead after the colonial military captain uncle of the poet, was in whaling. During this period, 1,146 whales were slaughtered to produce 10,000 tons of oil, picked out by small boats as they travelled north to give birth or south with milk-feeding calves. The layer of fat overlaying a whale is called the blanket. Long before the Australian East Coast whaling boom, the European and North American whaling industries of the 18th century saw this blanket boiled down and refined, used to wrap, warm, and illuminate a rapidly industrializing world. Oil from the bodies of whales smouldered in the street lamps of London, lit up shops and factory floors. It lubricated the joints of heavy machinery, was an emulsificant in soaps and cosmetics. Baleen extracted from the mouths of krill-feeding whales held the soft and leaky of society into rigid form, woven into waist-binding corsetry, formed the batons used by London's Metropolitan Police roaming the newly whale-lit streets. The luminous extracts of whales' bodies have been tied to the lowering in crime in European cities, but whom exactly was persecuted, carried away at the threat of bruising by the dislodged tooth of the whale? Through the whaling industry, a Jonean desire was fulfilled on a global scale. The industrializing world effectively swallowed into the collective body of 100,000 dismantled cetaceans. I think there's an intimacy here of living off and within the body of another, rib cages around rib cages, warmed by another's fat. On the east coast of Australia, this submersion was even more literal. In the town of Eden, those seeking a natural cure for rheumatism could bathe in the hot carcasses of a slaughtered whale, as I learnt from a picture book held in the Byron Bay Lighthouse Museum. I flipped through images from this specifically freakish form of necro swallowing, little blown-out male Jonahs baptized in rotten blubber, being washed in vats of liquefied oil. Today, Byron Bay has the highest property prices per square metre of the entirety of continental Australia. The whale blood has long since cleared from the seawater, and the beauty of the region has made it a popular destination for Instagram entrepreneurs harvesting and hawking imagery of their own lives played out from and through the region, influencers who inspired the short-lived Byron Bay-focused reality TV show, Byron Bays.
Byron Bay has this strong power that if it wants you here, it sucks you in, and if it doesn't, it literally spits you out. This is where forever starts. This is where it all begins. Forever.
I have a habit of scrolling through the accounts of influencer women based in this region, specifically those whose content focuses on their many beautiful children and rustic, sun-drenched, wholesome lives of surfing, foraging, healing, crafting, and nursing babes. Between bouts of whale watching, I wash my retinas in this steady stream of glorious reproductive labour, perfectly packaged and presented in the most flattering of golden hour light. The milk-feeding whales are elusive, visible only in exhalations and flashes. The Instagram mothers, by contrast, give over imagery of their parenting generously, in abundance. My working eyes feed in these digital shallows before returning to the labour of the binoculars for another deep dive towards the horizon, breath and body held tight. I linger on a post by one vocally anti-vax influencer which declares, "We are the granddaughters of the witches you couldn't kill," and I think about Silvia Federici's writing on women's reproductive labour being subsumed into the primitive accumulation of burgeoning capitalism by the witch hunts of the 16th century. I speak about my growing interest in whales and whale watching with my mother, after which she begins to receive the aforementioned male-narrated whale-swallowing video explainers in her own Instagram feed. She harvests them for me, and I gobble them up between episodes of Byron Bay. Stomach 1. Vorophilia, or vor, is the erotic desire to be swallowed whole. Not chewed or digested, but swallowed whole and then, at a later time, spat out whole. Stories attuned to vorophilia are as old as the sun itself. Think of myths of Cronus swallowing his own children, Zeus swallowing Metis. In the popular media of my own upbringing, stories abounded of individuals, or indeed entire classes of school children, being swallowed whole and travelling around the interior of the body. Vorophilia online has a clear slant towards stories whereby a monstrously large female figure swallows a diminutive male, sometimes as a form of punishment or suppression, but more often by accident. The unthinking, irrational feminine enveloping the fast-thinking male into her very flesh, back to the origin, oblivion, and formlessness taking over. This brings to mind an incident which took place in 2009 in Cologne, when a sinkhole opened up under the Cologne City Archives, immediately consuming thousands upon thousands of books, manuscripts, diagrams, and manifestos, hundreds of years of fastidious German record-keeping, and the neatly ordered fruits of Western thought, seminal works of European Enlightenment tossed back into the darkness of mud and sewer murk, the ordered thoughts of Goethe and Schiller and Kant expressing their wild fear and exhilaration of being lost in the horror of nature sublime, those words and illuminations mulched in the belly of the earth herself. In the stories of people being swallowed by whales, one recurring theme is that the regurgitated swallowees emerged bleached from the stomach acid of the whale. The archive released a pamphlet detailing the restoration program, which opens with the line, "When the historical archive of the city of Cologne collapsed in March 3rd, 2009, Cologne seemed to have lost its collective memory." The images in the pamphlet show volume upon volume of semi-digested, waterlogged material, dredged up from the ruins, rinsed, carefully dried, sponged, and softly pressed. The operation cost millions and has taken several years. This is my favorite because this hand is sponging a book called Von Zarter Hand, from Tender Hand. Object-based vor is the erotic desire to swallow objects whole. There are Reddit blogs of people discussing what they have swallowed and how it feels to have this specific object inside of them. There is, in a way, I think, a kind of tenderness to this specific kink, which has a gestational quality about it. I came across one blog post where the user expressed that they had swallowed several coins and were disappointed to not be able to hear them jangling and clinking inside themselves. I think about the prospectors who claim to hear gold singing beneath the Earth's surface. I wonder if petroleum or other energy resources ever call out for their own extraction for use in capitalist accumulation. Perhaps only uranium, which was named after Uranus, the ancient Greek god of the sky and heavens, who forced his wife, the Earth Gaia, to swallow her children back into her body as soon as they were born. Those who named uranium placed the cruel father sky deep within the womb of his own wife alongside his own offspring. He sits swallowed by darkness, with the wrath of as powerful as 1,000 suns. Heaven forbid that Gaia ever spit him out again. When geologists go out in search of uranium, they press their ears to the surface of the belly of the earth. They are listening for the sound of jangling coins. Stomach 2. In the Natural History Museum in London, there is a large model of a female blue whale, produced as a labour of love in 1936 by taxidermist Percy Stamvitz. It was originally suspended from the ceiling, and the craftsman who painted it apparently complained of experiencing a sort of seasickness while painting it due to its subtle swaying. The model is also said to have a kind of trapdoor in its base, and legend has it that museum staff would sneak inside during the construction for cigarette breaks. Richard Sabin, the cetacean curator at the Natural History Museum, tells me that before the torso of the whale was sealed, the craftsmen who had worked on it emptied their pockets of coins, notes, newspaper, and other ephemera and tossed them into the whale, and thus inside lies a kind of time machine. The whale is no longer suspended from the ceiling, so it no longer sways. If it did, perhaps the coins inside might jangle. When I went to visit the whale model, I noticed a sign explaining that the model was made before Western scientists had studied living blue whales. The model is thus placed instead upon the swollen bodies of beached and slaughtered blue whales instead of the sleeker, more streamlined torsos of living, swimming whales. This specific signage prompted me to undertake a filming experiment with the whale. To correct Stamvitz's misleading dysmorphic gaze upon the whale's form, I've been attempting to apply Instagram beauty filters to the whale. As you can see, the facial enhancing filters do not work most of the time on the taxidermied animals, but they do work on human faces like Darwin. But dieting filters, alternatively, do recognize whale forms and try to apply aspirational slimming effects. An unexpected effect of this that you'll see is that as the filter seeks a waist to cinch, like a roaming digital corset, it somehow animates these lifeless bodies into a semblance of horrible, twitchy aliveness. Stamvitz's whale, modelled from a corpse, galvanized once through its naturalistic hanging, and then again through Instagram beauty filters. Stomach 3. In an essay titled Into the Belly of the Whale, written just after the outbreak of World War II, George Orwell considers the questions of social responsibility in art and writing. He discusses the literature written by his contemporaries in the years leading up to the outbreak of the war, placing those who addressed the rising chaos, warmongering, and anti-Semitism in their writing on one side, and placing purely escapist literature that ignores social and political ills on the other side. Orwell is scathing of both parties, declaring the former to be blandly didactic and the latter to be empty and frivolous. He instead advocates for a writing style such as that of Henry Miller, who he claims writes as if he is inside the body of a transparent whale, aware of the injustices of the world, yet unbothered and in full acceptance of them. He writes, "For the fact is that being inside a whale is a very comfortable, cozy, home-like thought. The whale's belly is simply a womb big enough for an adult. There you are in the dark, cushioned space that exactly fits you, with yards of blubber between yourself and reality, able to keep an attitude of completest indifference, no matter what happens. A storm that would sink all the battleships in the world would hardly reach you as an echo. Short of being dead, it is the final, unsurpassable stage of irresponsibility." In Miller's case, the whale happens to be transparent. He feels no impulse to alter or control the processes he is undergoing. He has performed the essential Jonah act of allowing himself to be swallowed, remaining passive, accepting. It perhaps goes without saying that, bar a fleeting and miscomprehending mention of Anne Nin, all of the writers discussed by Orwell are men. He seems to have made out the belly of the whale as a kind of writer's retreat for white male novelists, a cozy submarine artist residency. In my own practice, I'm still trying to figure out where of Orwell's cetaceous perspectives to position myself. I'm trying to be at once inside, outside, through, above, and below the whale, and to be the whale myself, all at the same time. There is a second blue whale on display at the Natural History Museum, to be found down the corridor from Stamvitz's model. This whale is not an approximation. Instead, it is the real skeleton of a juvenile female blue whale that was beached in 1891. In 2017, the museum gave her the name Hope and arranged her in a diving, feeding posture in the museum's main hall. In this naturalistic diving position, the whale consumes not her regular diet of krill and sea plastic. Instead, she swallows a steady stream of tourists and schoolchildren. And if you can find the correct angle on the opposite balcony, you can watch this swallowing and the regurgitation of museum visitors in real time. It was here, in Hinser Hall, so named after the billionaire hedge fund manager and climate science denial funder, under the skeleton of Hope the whale, that the petroleum group of the Geological Society, a society of those, quote-unquote, dedicated to petroleum exploration and production, chose to host their annual awards dinner from the years 2014 to 2019. Petroleum, produced from organic matter sunk and metabolized in the gut of the earth, forcibly regurgitated since its discovery as an illuminant in the mid-1890s. Petroleum, whale oil's direct successor. What does it mean for the Petroleum Society, representatives of an industry largely responsible for global climate catastrophe, to hold their annual gala event underneath the skeleton of Hope the whale, an emptied vat of combustible raw matter? To dine below the whale, symbolically as close as possible to inside the belly of a whale, wherein one may ignore, deny, or reject, as Orwell claimed, the horrors of the collapsing world outside. The activist group Extinction Rebellion staged a mass sit-in to protest this dinner and the underscoring ties between the museum and the fossil fuel industry, calling for transparency in this alarmingly opaque relationship. The dinner still went ahead amidst some pretty bad press. There are few images of this dinner, showing shrouded tables illuminated by candlelight, the cavernous Gothic ceiling of Hinser Hall lit up like the ribcage of the Leviathan herself. The Petroleum Society members assembled. 150 fossil fuel figureheads waiting hungrily below Hope. I imagine their open mouths, their esophagi, the darkness below, swallow upon swallow, the digestive enzymes releasing. I was curious about the specific meals served that evening, and so after quite a few calls to catering companies, I landed on the following likely menu. The dinner started with grilled and poached asparagus, parmesan biscotti, pickled onions, and asparagus jelly. This was followed by maigre sole, chervil root puree, razor clams and wild mushrooms and scallions, chervil foam, and beurre noisette. The main course was milk-fed cannon of lamb and confit lamb shoulder, garlic leaves and sprouting broccoli, with spring swede, poached potatoes, and lamb juice. The two desserts explored each texture of pineapple, with pineapple carpaccio, pineapple granite, and pineapple air, followed by a seasonal rhubarb compote with spiced vanilla cream, macadamia nut brittle, rhubarb, and ginger sorbet. Stomach 4. The Malm whale, a juvenile male blue whale, became stranded on the Swedish coast in 1865. August Wilhelm Malm, the curator of the Gothenburg Natural History Museum, caught wind of this and had the 16-meter-long creature hollowed out and upholstered onto a wooden frame created by shipwrights. The taxidermied Malm whale was paraded around Europe as a curiosity for several years before being placed on permanent display in a specially built room in the Natural History Museum in Gothenburg. The particular attraction of the Malm whale was that it was fitted so that visitors to the museum could climb a specially constructed staircase to enter into the open jaws and emptied interior of the whale, which was lined with floral wallpaper, red carpet, and fitted with 2 long side benches and a single hanging bulb. Several dinners and coffee circles took place inside the whale. Scandinavians who visited the whale as children collectively misremembered there being a cafe inside the whale, something museum archivists declare was never the case. The jaws of the whale were closed for regular visits in the 1930s, apparently, according to the museum signage and the website, because a couple was found copulating inside. Such perversity could not be allowed. The whale is now only reopened occasionally on special occasions. One such opening occurs a few weeks before Christmas, during which Santa will welcome children into the mouth of the Malm whale to give them gifts, or maybe lumps of coal. Determined not to miss this rare public instance of a celebrated bearded white man lodged publicly in the interior of a genuine skinned whale, I travelled to Gothenburg only to find out that Santa would be absent this year due to rising COVID levels. The whale's jaws were open for visitors in any case, and I filmed this event. This is a short excerpt of my findings. I was inspired by the skin of the Malm whale, how it had been graffitied and battered. I started working with the petroleum-based polyester material, which is most frequently used in budget greenhouse construction. Into this skin, I'm scratching things that may get caught in the baleen teeth of a whale on their way in and out. Tender hands, seaweed, harpoons, crustaceans, remnants of the Cologne State Archive, British trading beads, electrical detritus, ox-heart tomatoes. This is a scrimshaw that will be sliced and woven into long baleen or Venetian blinds. This is the 3 meters, and this was a test. In her recent book Fathoms, Rebecca Griggs explains that the inside of a whale is by no means an effective sanctuary from the ills, wars, and toxins of the world at large. Whales' bodies carry the chemical detritus of human violence in their fat, wax, and baleen. The ear of the whale has no opening, and so the whale's earwax accumulates over the decades internally. The inner ear of a whale forms a waxen timeline of the whale's fluctuating stress hormones. Would a writer within the belly of a transparent whale not feel the tremors of nuclear tests in the South Pacific, or the even louder pneumatic guns used by marine petroleum prospectors in their search for subaquatic oil? Would the writer be insulated from the cellular trauma released into the wakes of the Middle Passage? Griggs writes of a whale washed up on the shore of southern Spain that had in its stomach an entire industrial polythene greenhouse. Orwell's translucent whale swallowed herself and choked to death in the process.
Not a bite for days. We can't hold out much longer. I never thought it would end this way, Figaro. Starving to death in the belly of a whale. My poor little Pinocchio. He was such a good boy. It's hopeless, Figaro. There isn't a fish left. If the monster doesn't wake up soon, I'm afraid we are done for.
Womb, guts, etc. When one is swallowed by a whale, where do you go? Stomach, womb? In general, this space seems to be imagined as a nondescript cavity, a holding space for wayward cargo, cozy, safe, and warm. I remember being told by a man who had worked at the Berlin Club Commission that a club should be designed to feel like a womb. Partiers should feel protected from the outside world. It should be dark and humid, and the sound system should be so good as to infiltrate the flesh, a placental sound system. The dancers should be able to dissolve into one another. The dream club would enable a return to a pre-verbal state, to be as innocent and irresponsible as an embryo. In one infamous club, once the sun rises, it is allowed to stream inside through a set of mechanically controlled baleen blinds. The dancers are fed glimpses of the bright real world outside through mechanical cetaceous teeth. The inside of the whale's belly is very dark. The only source of light comes from the bioluminescent glimmer of swallowed deep-sea squid and jellyfish. But how to play cards or write a great novel in such poor lighting? As it turns out, in many cases, the belly of the whale is fitted with a light bulb, a candle, or some other form of brightness. Note the electrical fittings inside the Malm whale, or the surreptitious cigarettes smoked in the Natural History Museum. In stories, some swallowies imagine to light small campfires within the belly, or to light oil lamps that they've smuggled in with them somehow, which, on reflection, were likely fueled with oil from the bodies of other whales. In many cases, it is the igniting of these small fires that leads the whale to eject their swallowed cargo, very often killing the host cetacean in the process. My mother had breast cancer in her late 40s while I was a teenager, and I remember distinctly a phrase of hers from this time, a common one from those who find themselves suddenly unwell, that her body had betrayed her. I understood this as your body doing something malevolent, behind your back, a backstab but under your spine, that only you find out about once the deed is done. The body is a criminal, a thief, a cat burglar, sneaking around under the cover of darkness of one's own flesh. To avoid betrayal, one must continually observe oneself. If one watches oneself closely enough, the malevolent deed may be avoided. If I'm honest, I only have the slimmest, faintest idea of how the inside of my own body functions. It shocks me that I know so little about it, that I can't really envision it, its colours, shapes, or spaces. I'm disturbed that even if I were to read as many Wikipedia articles out there as there are, or watch medical emergency shows, or dog my 2 doctor friends for scraps of insight, I really still won't know what it looks like inside of me. And thus I can't watch it, I can't keep an eye on it. When I imagine the inside of my body, I think of the previously alluded to scene in the TV show version of The Magic School Bus, where the teacher shrinks down her students and they spend the day riding platelets like whitewater rafts and gurgling in baths of stomach acid. I imagine my organs as a pile of grocery vegetables. I realize the image I have of the inside of myself is an illusion, a deception, like when I learnt that the fantastic images I'd seen of outer space as a child were all actually black and white, with the colour just added as an approximation afterwards. As a teenager, I was told how Da Vinci would have his assistants steal the corpses of the recently deceased, who, as it turned out later, as I learnt later, were often poor criminalised women, so that he could open them up and draw the interiors. I was told that the church forbade this because the human body was considered sacred, that we should not see or depict what is beneath the skin. This lesson in art history was used as a key explainer for the transit from the Dark Ages to the Enlightenment. Da Vinci literally bringing daylight into the dark interior of the body. His assistants in the morgue would have scrambled with surgeons and medical students for lukewarm skin. It strikes me that at this time, when glass windows were expensive, the oil lamps used in operating galleries would have been fueled by whale oil, the Enlightenment lit by the body of the whale. Federici talks about this shift in anatomical thinking as a form of disenchantment, the whole body splayed open and reconfigured as a set of mechanical moving parts, which in turn served a vision of bodies as producers of labour, machines of a capital accumulation. Medical enlightenment happened slowly. It continues to happen slowly. Various parts of human bodies remain in relative darkness. Light takes the form of medical funding. The coin is a torch. It astonishes me that to confirm whether or not I have endometriosis, I would need to have surgery. The gynecologist who inserted the ultrasound stick into me told me afterwards that to make any concrete diagnosis, they would need to go inside and have a look with a torch or an oil lamp, I imagined. My father recently had surgery to try and remove an awful thing. They did numerous exhausting tests before he was opened up. Afterwards, my sister relayed some of the surgeon's notes, and what stayed with me most of all was that apparently inside, even for this genius surgeon, all flesh, good or evil, is very similar in appearance. The malevolent body blends into the functioning, productive body, even once opened up in full light. Betrayal and theft in the broad light of day. There are several procedures that can be used to go inside and have a look of the human body that do not involve being sliced open. Personally, I opted for the capsule endoscope. This small pill camera, equipped with a tiny LED light, takes multiple images per second as it travels through your digestive system. The images are beamed out in real time to an external server and compiled into a short film piece. Earlier this week, I went to a gastroenterologist at the Berlin City Praxen to enlighten my interior, to see what I might find. I was sent the results via WeTransfer. Thank you. For the following 3 minutes, I invite you to share with me this journey into my own interior. Thank you.